Marcus wiped his sweaty palms on his worn jeans as he stood outside the tall iron gates of Pemberton Academy. The fancy private school looked like a castle from the movies. Its red brick walls stretched high into the gray sky. Students in crisp uniforms walked past him without looking. Their shoes clicked on the clean sidewalk. He had never seen a place like this before. Marcus lived in a small foster home across town. The walls there had peeling paint. The carpet had stains that never came out. But today was different. Today he would play piano at the most important competition of his life. Mrs. Chun, his music teacher from the community center, had signed him up. She believed in him when no one else did. Marcus had learned to play on an old piano with missing keys. Some keys stuck when he pressed them, others made no sound at all. But he practiced every day after school. The security guard at the gate looked at Marcus with cold eyes. He wore a dark blue uniform with shiny buttons. His name tag said Robert. The man checked his clipboard twice before letting Marcus inside. Marcus walked across the main courtyard. Expensive cars filled the parking lot. Parents in fancy clothes talked in small groups. Their jewelry sparkled in the afternoon sun. Some pointed at Marcus as he passed. He heard whispers but could not make out the words. The main building had marble floors that reflected the light from giant windows. Oil paintings of old men in suits hung on the walls. Everything smelled like lemon, Polish and fresh flowers. Marcus felt very small in this place. A woman in a gray suit approached him. Her hair was pulled back tight. She wore red lipstick and pearl earrings. A small badge on her jacket said, Mrs. Wellington Competition Director. You must be Marcus Thompson, she said. Her voice was smooth but not warm. We received your application at the last minute. Quite unusual for someone from your background to enter our competition. Marcus nodded. He did not know what to say. The woman looked him up and down. Her eyes stopped at his old sneakers. One. Had a small hole near the toe? Follow me, Mrs. Wellington said. I will show you where you will be staying until the competition begins. She led him down a long hallway. Their footsteps echoed off the high ceiling. Students peeked out of classrooms. As they passed, Marcus heard giggles and whispers behind him. They stopped at a small room near the back of the building. It had one window that looked out at the dumpsters behind the kitchen. The room held a single bed with white sheets. A small desk sat in the corner. Everything was clean but felt cold. You will sleep here tonight, Mrs. Wellington said. Dinner is at 6 in the main dining hall. The competition begins tomorrow morning at 9. After she left, Marcus sat on the bed. He pulled out a crumpled photo from his pocket. It showed him and his little sister Emma at the community center. She was only 8 years old. She lived in a different foster home now. They rarely saw each. Other Emma loved to hear him play piano. She would sit next to him on the bench and listen with her eyes closed. She always clapped when he finished a song. Marcus missed her smile more than anything. He had promised Emma he would win this competition. The prize money was $5,000. Enough to help him get his own place when he turned 18 next year. Maybe then Emma could live with him. They could be a real family. That evening, Marcus found the dining hall. It was huge with long wooden tables and crystal chandeliers. Students in navy blue uniforms sat in groups. They all seemed to know each other. Their conversation stopped when Marcus walked in. He took a tray and got in line for food. The kitchen staff served him without making eye contact. The food looked fancy, but he did not recognize most of it. He picked simple things like bread and soup. Marcus found an empty table in the corner. He ate alone while listening to the other students talk. They discussed summer trips to Europe and ski lessons in Colorado. Their parents owned businesses and worked as doctors or lawyers. 3 boys from his table walked over to Marcus. The tallest one had blonde hair and expensive glasses. His uniform looked brand new. A name tag on his shirt said, President, Student, Counsel. So you are the charity case? The boy said with a smirk. I am James Pemberton III. My great-grandfather built this school. The other boys laughed. One had red hair and freckles. The other was short with dark hair slicked back with gel. I heard you learned piano on some broken old thing, James continued. Tomorrow should be interesting. Real pianos are quite different from toys. Marcus felt his face get hot. He wanted to stand up and leave, but he thought about Emma. He needed to stay calm. He needed to win. Good luck tomorrow, James said in a fake sweet voice. You will need it. The three boys walked away laughing. Other students stared at Marcus. Some looked sorry for him. Others seemed amused by the whole thing. Marcus finished his soup quickly. He wanted to get back to his room. As he stood to leave, a girl with brown hair and kind eyes approached his table. Do not listen to them, she whispered. James thinks he owns everyone here. I am Sarah. I play violin in the competition tomorrow. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. You must be very good to get invited here, Sarah continued. Mrs. Chun called the school herself. She said you were the most talented student she had ever taught. Marcus felt a little better hearing this. Mrs. Chun had helped him so much over the past 3 years. She stayed late to give him extra lessons. She brought him sheet music from her own collection. She believed he could do great things. Back in his room, Marcus lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would play in front of judges and hundreds of people. The other students had been taking lessons since they were very young. They had expensive instruments and private teachers, but Marcus had something they did not have. He had hunger. He had a reason to win that went beyond money or prizes. He was fighting for his future with Emma. He was fighting to prove that kids like him could succeed too. Outside his window, the school grounds grew quiet. Streetlights cast long shadows across the empty courtyard. Marcus closed his eyes and pictured himself at the piano. His fingers moved across imaginary keys as he played his favorite piece in his mind. Tomorrow would change everything. He could feel it in his bones. Good or bad, nothing would ever be the same after tomorrow. Marcus drifted off to sleep with Emma's face in his thoughts. In his dreams, she was clapping and smiling as he played the most beautiful music in the world. Marcus woke up before dawn. Gray light filtered through the small window of his room. His stomach felt tight with nerves. Today was the day that would change his life forever. He got dressed in his best clothes. The black pants were a little too short but clean. His white shirt had a small stain near the collar that he had tried to scrub out. His shoes were old but polished as best he could manage. The dining hall was already busy when Marcus arrived for breakfast. Students sat with their families who had come to watch the competition. Expensive suits and designer dresses filled every table. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries made his mouth water. Marcus took his tray and picked simple foods again. Toast with butter and a glass of orange juice. He found the same corner table from the night before. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, making everything look golden. Mrs. Chun arrived just as Marcus finished eating. She wore her best dress and had her gray hair pinned up nicely. Her face lit up when she saw him. She was the closest thing to family Marcus had left. How did you sleep? She asked, sitting across from him. Not much, Marcus admitted. I kept thinking about today. Mrs. Chun reached across the table and patted his hand. Her fingers were rough from years of playing piano. She had calluses in the same places. Marcus was starting to get them. Remember what I taught you, she said softly. The music comes from your heart, not your hands. These other students may have fancy lessons, but you have soul. Marcus nodded. Mrs. Chun had said this to him 100 times before. But today the words felt more important than ever. At 8:30, all the competitors gathered in the main auditorium. The room was huge with red velvet seats and a stage that looked like something from a real theater. A beautiful black grand piano sat in the center under bright lights. Marcus counted 22 other students. Most were around his age, though a few looked younger. They all had their families with them. Parents fussed over their children, straightening ties and smoothing hair. Mrs. Wellington stood on the stage with a microphone. She wore a different suit today, this one dark blue with silver buttons. Her voice echoed through the large room as she explained the rules. Each student will perform one piece of their choosing, she announced. The judges will score based on technical skill, musical interpretation, and stage presence. The winner will receive $5,000 and a full scholarship to our summer music program. Marcus felt his heart beating faster. $5,000 would change everything for him and Emma. The first student walked on stage. A girl with perfect blonde curls and a blue dress that probably cost more than Marcus spent on clothes all year. She sat at the piano and played a piece by Chopin. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys. Every note was perfect and precise. The audience clapped politely when she finished. The judges wrote notes on their clipboards. One judge was a famous piano teacher from the city. Another worked at the local symphony. The third was a music professor from the university. Student after student performed. They played difficult pieces by famous composers. Some made small mistakes but recovered quickly. Others played flawlessly but without much emotion. The music was technically good but felt cold to Marcus. James Pemberton III performed a piece by Rachmaninoff. It was extremely difficult and he played it well. His family cheered loudly from the front row. His mother wore diamonds that sparkled under the stage lights. His father recorded everything on an expensive camera. As Marcus waited for his turn, he noticed something strange. A man in a maintenance uniform was working near the piano between performances. He had tools and seemed to be adjusting something. Marcus could not see exactly what the man was doing from his seat in the back. Finally, Mrs. Wellington called his name. Marcus Thompson. The room grew quiet as Marcus walked down the aisle. He heard whispers from the audience. Some people pointed at his clothes. Others shook their heads as if they felt sorry for him. Marcus climbed the steps to the stage. The lights were brighter than he expected. He could barely see the audience beyond the front few rows. His legs felt shaky as he walked to the piano bench. He sat down and placed his hands on the keys. Something felt wrong immediately. The keys were in the right places, but they felt different. Lighter somehow. Marcus pressed middle C gently. No sound came out. Confused, he tried other keys. Some made very quiet sounds. Others made no sound at all. Marcus looked up at Mrs. Wellington in the wings. She was watching him with a small smile. On her face, the audience began to murmur. People were confused about why no music was playing. Marcus pressed harder on the keys. A few weak notes came out, but most keys produced nothing. His heart sank as he realized what had happened. Someone had sabotaged the piano. The man he saw earlier must have disconnected or damaged the internal parts that made the keys work. This was not a real piano anymore. It was just a shell that looked like one. Marcus looked out at the audience. James Pemberton sat in the front row with his arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on his face. Other students giggled behind their hands. Some parents looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The judges looked confused. They whispered among themselves and checked their papers. One judge stood up as if to say something, but Marcus made a decision. That surprised everyone, including himself. He would not give up. He would not let them see him quit. If they wanted to humiliate him, he would show them what real courage looked like. Marcus began to play his piece anyway. His fingers moved across the silent keys with perfect timing and emotion. He had practiced this piece 1,000 times. He knew every note by heart. His hands danced across the keyboard even though barely any sound came out. He closed his eyes and played as if the piano was working perfectly. In his mind, he could hear every note clearly. He thought about Emma, how proud she would be. He thought about Mrs. Chun and all the hours she had spent teaching him. He thought about every kid who had ever been told they were not good enough. The audience watched in amazement as Marcus performed the most emotional and passionate piano performance they had ever seen, even though they could barely hear it. His whole body moved with the music. His face showed every emotion the piece was meant to convey. Some people in the audience began to cry. They could see the music in Marcus even if they could not hear it properly. His performance was so powerful that it transcended the need for actual sound. When Marcus finished, he opened his eyes and looked out at the crowd. The room was completely silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Then another. Soon the entire audience was on their feet giving Marcus The longest standing ovation in the competition's history. Marcus stood up from the piano bench with tears in his eyes. He had just given the performance of his life on a piano that barely worked. He had turned their cruel joke into his greatest triumph. As he walked off the stage, he saw Mrs. Chun in the audience wiping tears from her cheeks. Her smile was brighter than the stage lights. Even some of the students who had laughed at him earlier now looked at him with respect and admiration. The competition was not over yet. But Marcus had already won something more valuable than any prize. He had won his dignity and shown everyone what it really meant to be a musician. After Marcus left the stage, the auditorium buzzed with confused voices. People talked in whispers and pointed toward the piano. The judges huddled together, clearly unsure what to do next. Mrs. Wellington walked to the microphone with a forced smile. Her face looked pale under the bright stage lights. She cleared her throat and spoke to the restless crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have experienced a technical difficulty with our piano," she announced. "Our maintenance team will inspect the instrument before we continue." Marcus sat in the back row next to Mrs. Chun. His hand still trembled from the performance. Mrs. Chun squeezed his shoulder gently. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," she whispered. "You turned their cruelty into art." The maintenance team came on stage with their tools. They opened the piano and examined the inside carefully. After several minutes, the head technician walked over to Mrs. Wellington. He spoke quietly in her ear. Her face went from pale to bright red. "It appears someone has deliberately damaged our piano," she announced reluctantly. "Several wires have been cut and keys have been disconnected." "This was not an accident," the audience gasped. Parents looked shocked and angry. Students turned to stare at each other with suspicion. But Marcus noticed that James Pemberton was no longer smiling. He was whispering urgently with his parents. A security guard approached the maintenance worker. They talked for a moment before. The guard walked directly to James. The red-haired boy who had been with James the night before looked terrified. He started talking quickly, pointing at James and shaking his head. Within minutes, the truth came out. The maintenance worker who had tampered with the piano was James's uncle. He worked at the school and had access to all the equipment. James had paid him to make sure Marcus would fail in front of everyone. The head judge, a distinguished woman with silver hair, stood up from her table. She walked onto the stage and took the microphone from Mrs. Wellington. "In my 40 years of judging musical competitions, I have never seen anything like what happened here today," she said. Her voice was strong and clear. What was meant to be an act of cruelty became a demonstration of true artistry. She turned to look directly at Marcus in the back row. "Young man, would you please come back to the stage?" Marcus felt his legs shake as he stood up. The audience watched silently as he walked down the aisle again. His heart pounded so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. When he reached the stage, the judge smiled warmly at him. "What is your name?" she asked. "Marcus Thompson," he replied. Quietly, "Marcus, I have been judging piano competitions since before you were born. I have heard thousands of talented young musicians. But what you just did was not just music, it was pure courage." She paused and looked out at the audience. "You played with such passion and emotion that we could all hear the music even when the piano was silent. That is the mark of a true artist. The technical skill can be taught, but what you have comes from the soul." The audience began to clap again. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes but tried to hold them back. "However," the judge continued, "you deserve the chance to be heard. Properly, we will have a new piano brought in immediately, and you will perform again." Marcus looked shocked. "But I already played my piece." "The other students only got one chance." The judge smiled. "The other students had working instruments. You had to overcome sabotage. That changes everything." While they waited for the new piano, James Pemberton was escorted out of the auditorium with his parents. His uncle was led away by security. The red-haired boy who had confessed everything sat alone, crying quietly. Sarah, the violin player who had been kind to Marcus, came over to him. "I am so sorry that happened to you," she said. "James has been bullying students here for years. No one ever stood up to him before. Other students began approaching Marcus. Some apologized for laughing the night before. Others said they admired his courage. Even students who had ignored him completely were now treating him with respect. A beautiful new grand piano was wheeled onto the stage. The maintenance team spent 30 minutes setting it up and testing every key. Finally, they declared it ready. Mrs. Wellington had disappeared somewhere. The head judge took over as the master of ceremonies. Marcus Thompson will now perform his piece on a properly functioning instrument, she announced. Marcus walked to the new piano. This one was even more beautiful than the first. The keys felt smooth and responsive under his fingers. When he pressed middle C, the note rang out clear and strong. He sat quietly for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The piece he had chosen was Clair de Lune by Debussy. It was not the most technically difficult piece in the competition, but it was the most meaningful to him. Mrs. Chun had taught him this piece during his first year of lessons. She said it reminded her of moonlight dancing on water. Marcus always thought of Emma when he played it. The gentle melody made him think of holding his little sister while she fell asleep. Marcus began to play. This time, every note filled the auditorium with crystal clear sound. The melody flowed like water, soft and peaceful at first, then building to moments of powerful emotion before returning to quiet beauty. But something magical happened as Marcus played. The music he was creating now was even more beautiful than what he had played on the broken piano. Having overcome the sabotage had freed something inside him. He played with a confidence and depth he had never felt before. The audience was completely silent. Even the judges had stopped taking notes and were simply listening. The music seemed to touch everyone in the room. Parents held hands with their children. Students who had been rivals earlier now shared looks of amazement. When Marcus finished, the silence lasted for several heartbeats. Then the applause erupted like thunder. The entire audience leaped to their feet. People cheered and whistled. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Marcus stood up from the piano bench and bowed slightly. He looked out at the crowd and saw Mrs. Chung crying with happiness. He saw Sarah clapping enthusiastically. He saw parents and students who had treated him badly. Earlier now, looking at him with wonder and respect, the head judge walked over to Marcus and shook his hand. "That was extraordinary," she said. "In all my years I have rarely heard such musicality from someone so young." Marcus was escorted off the stage to wait with the other competitors while the judges made their decision. But everyone in the room already knew what the result would be. The deliberation took only 15 minutes. When the judges returned, they looked serious but satisfied. The head judge took the microphone one final time. "The judges have reached a unanimous decision," she announced. This year's winner demonstrated not only exceptional musical talent, but also remarkable character under extreme pressure. Marcus held his breath. The winner of this year's competition and recipient of the $5,000 prize is Marcus Thompson. The auditorium exploded in cheers. Marcus felt his knees go weak. Mrs. Chun rushed onto the stage and hugged him tightly. The other competitors, led by Sarah, surrounded them with congratulations. As Marcus accepted his prize, he thought about Emma. Soon he would see her again. Soon they could start building the life together that he had always dreamed of, but more than the money, Marcus had won something that could never be taken away. He had proven that talent and heart could overcome any obstacle. He had shown that a kid from a foster home could stand on the same stage as the privileged students and not just compete but triumph. The boy who walked into Pemberton Academy had been unknown and unwanted. The young man who left was a champion. 3 months after the competition, Marcus sat at a real piano in his very own apartment. The small 2-bedroom place was not fancy, but it was home. Sunlight streamed through clean windows onto the wooden floors he had scrubbed himself. The prize. Money had changed everything. Marcus used part of it to rent this apartment and buy basic furniture. He found a job at a local music store after school. The owner, Mr. Rodriguez, had heard about Marcus's victory and offered him work right away. But the best part was Emma. She sat next to him on the piano bench, her small fingers trying to copy the simple melody he was teaching her. Her foster parents had agreed to let her visit every weekend. Soon, when Marcus turned 18 and finished high school, she could live with him permanently. "Play the pretty song again," Emma said, her eyes bright with excitement. Marcus smiled and began Clair de Lune once more. Emma leaned against his shoulder and listened with the same wonder she had always shown. Nothing made Marcus happier than sharing music with his little sister. A knock at the door interrupted their practice. Marcus opened it to find Mrs. Chun standing in the hallway with a newspaper in her hands. "Have you seen this?" she asked, holding up the front page of the local paper. The headline read, "Foster Kids Piano Triumph Inspires City." Below was a large photo of Marcus at the competition piano. The article told the whole story of what had happened at Pemberton Academy. "People are talking about you everywhere," Mrs. Chun said as she sat down on Marcus's second-hand couch. "The community center has received dozens of calls from families wanting piano lessons. They are even starting a scholarship fund for kids who cannot afford lessons." Marcus felt overwhelmed. He had never expected his story to reach so many people. "There is more," Mrs. Chun continued. "I received a call yesterday from the dean of the State University Music Program. They want to offer you a full scholarship when you graduate high school." Emma clapped her hands excitedly, even though she did not fully understand what this meant. Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears. A college scholarship would open doors he had never dared to dream about. Mrs. Chun pulled out another letter from her purse. "This one came to the community center addressed to you." Marcus opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive paper. "Dear Marcus," he read aloud, "my name is Elena Vasquez. I am a concert pianist who was in the audience at Pemberton Academy. Your performance moved me more than any music I have heard in years. I would like to offer you free private lessons. If you are interested, please call me at your convenience." Marcus stared at the letter in disbelief. Elena Vasquez was famous. He had seen her perform on television and listened to her recordings. "This cannot be real," he whispered. Mrs. Chun smiled. "Your talent was always real, Marcus. Now the world is finally seeing it." The next morning, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at school. Sarah, the violin player from the competition, was waiting by his locker. "Hi, Marcus," she said shyly. "I want to tell you something." Marcus closed his locker and turned to face her. Sarah looked nervous but determined. "After what happened at the competition, I convinced my parents to transfer me to your school," she said. "Pemberton Academy is not the place I thought it was. I would rather be somewhere that values character over money." Marcus was surprised but happy. Sarah was one of the few students who had been kind to him that day. "I was wondering," she continued, "would you like to practice together sometime?" "I think we could learn a lot from each other," Marcus smiled. "I would like that very much." That afternoon, Marcus made the phone call to Elena Vasquez. Her voice was warm and encouraging over the phone. "I have been teaching for 20 years, she told him, "but I rarely meet a student with your natural musicality. I believe you have the potential to be truly special." They arranged to meet the following Saturday at her studio downtown. Marcus could barely contain his excitement as he hung up the phone. The weeks that followed were like a dream. Elena proved to be an amazing teacher. She pushed Marcus to play more challenging pieces while helping him develop his technique. Under her guidance, his playing reached new levels of sophistication and power. At school, Marcus found himself becoming something of a celebrity. Students who had never spoken to him before wanted to hear his story. Teachers treated him with new respect. The music teacher asked him to perform at the winter concert, but the most meaningful change was in Marcus himself. The confidence he had gained from surviving the competition affected every part of his life. He spoke up more in class. He made new friends. He began to believe that his dreams were not just possible, but inevitable. One evening, as Marcus practiced in his apartment, Emma fell asleep leaning against his arm. He looked down at her peaceful face and thought about how far they had both come. 6 months ago, they were just two foster kids with no family and no future. Now they had a home, hope, and each other. Marcus had learned that sometimes the worst moments in life could become the doorways to the best ones. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mrs. Chun. Turn on Channel 7 News. You are going to want to see this. Marcus gently moved Emma to the couch and turned on the television. The news anchor was talking about a story that had captured the city's attention. The piano competition scandal at Pemberton Academy has led to major changes at the prestigious school, the reporter said. James Pemberton III has been expelled and his uncle has been fired. Mrs. Wellington has resigned as competition director. The story continued, but perhaps the most significant outcome has been the inspiration provided by Marcus Thompson, the foster child whose courage and talent have touched thousands of people across the region. The report showed footage of the new scholarship program at the community center. Dozens of children from low-income families were now receiving free music lessons. Many of them said Marcus was their hero. Marcus turned off the television and sat quietly for a moment. He thought about that terrible night at Pemberton Academy when James and his friends had tried to humiliate him. They had wanted to prove that kids like Marcus did not belong in their world. Instead, Marcus had proven that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. He had shown that character mattered more than privilege. Most importantly, he had inspired other young people to believe in themselves. Emma stirred on the couch and opened her eyes. Will you play the pretty song one more time? She asked sleepily. Marcus sat back down at the piano and began Clair de Lune again. As the beautiful melody filled their small apartment, he thought about the future. College, a career in music, and most importantly, a real family with Emma. The broken piano at Pemberton Academy was meant to silence him. Instead, it had helped him find his true voice. Marcus had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from perfect conditions, but from refusing to give up when everything goes wrong. As he played the final notes of the piece, Marcus smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight he was exactly where he belonged, at home with his sister, making music and dreaming of all the beautiful songs still to be played. 2 years had passed since the piano competition that changed everything. The young man who once felt invisible now walked through the halls of Lincoln Community College with quiet confidence. His music scholarship had opened doors he never imagined possible. The college campus buzzed with students rushing to their morning classes. He carried his worn backpack and a folder of sheet music as he made his way to the practice rooms in the music building. Other students nodded and smiled as he passed. Many knew his story and looked up to him. In the practice room, he sat at the upright piano and began his daily warm-up exercises. His fingers moved with practiced ease across the keys. The calluses that had once marked him as different now showed his dedication to his craft. Every day he spent at least 3 hours practicing and perfecting his technique. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. She was now 11 years old and living with him in a small apartment near campus. The message made him smile. Good luck with your recital practice today. I made you lunch and left it in the fridge. The recital she mentioned was no ordinary performance. In 2 weeks he would be playing as a featured soloist with the City Symphony Orchestra, the same symphony that had judges at the competition years ago. The conductor had personally invited him after hearing about his progress in college. As he practiced the challenging piece by Rachmaninoff, memories of that day at the academy flooded back. He remembered the fear, the humiliation, and then the triumph. That broken piano had taught him that real music came from the heart, not from perfect conditions. A knock on the practice room door interrupted his thoughts. His college professor, Dr. Martinez, peeked inside with a warm smile. She was an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes who had become like a grandmother to him. How is the practice going? She asked, settling into a chair near the piano. Better. Each day, he replied, finishing the difficult passage he had been working on. But I still get nervous thinking about playing with the full orchestra. Dr. Martinez chuckled softly. After what you survived at that competition, I think you can handle anything. Besides, you have something many trained musicians lack. What is that? You play with your whole soul. Technical skill can be taught, but passion like yours is a gift. She pulled out a letter from her folder and handed it to him. The envelope was thick and official-looking, with a return address from the state university. "This came to my office yesterday," she said with a mysterious smile. He opened the letter carefully and read it twice before the words sank in. The state university was offering him a full graduate scholarship to continue his music education. They wanted him to study under their most prestigious piano professor and eventually pursue a career as a professional performer. "This is incredible," he whispered, staring at the letter in disbelief. "There is more," Dr. Martinez said, pulling out another document. "They also want you to teach master classes for young students from disadvantaged backgrounds. You would be helping kids just like you were a few years ago." The idea of teaching other young musicians filled him with excitement. He thought about all the children at the community center who dreamed of playing piano but could not afford proper lessons. Now he could help make their dreams come true. That evening he cooked dinner for his sister in their tiny kitchen. She sat at the small table doing her homework while he stirred pasta sauce on the old stove. Their apartment was simple but filled with warmth and love. "Tell me about your day," he said as they ate together. His sister's face lit up as she talked about her school friends and the book she was reading for English class. She had grown into a confident, happy girl who loved learning. The stability of living together had helped her blossom. "I have some exciting news to share," he said when she finished talking. He told her about the graduate school offer and the opportunity to teach other young musicians. Her eyes grew wide with pride and excitement. "Does this mean you will be famous, like the piano players on television?" she asked. He laughed. "Maybe someday. But more importantly, it means we can help other kids who grew up like we did. Kids who think their dreams are too big." After dinner, they sat together on their second-hand couch and watched a movie. These quiet moments were precious to him. He remembered all the nights they had spent apart in different foster homes, dreaming of being together again. The next morning brought another surprise. A reporter from the local newspaper called, wanting to do a follow-up story about his journey since the competition. She was particularly interested in the scholarship program that had started at the community center. "Your story has inspired so many young people," the reporter said during their phone interview. "The music program has grown from 12 students to over 200. Many of them say you motivated them to pursue their dreams." He felt humbled by the impact his experience had created. What started as a cruel attempt to embarrass him had become a source of hope for hundreds of children. Later that week, he visited the community center where it all began. The old building had been renovated with donations from people who heard his story. New pianos filled practice rooms that were once empty. The walls displayed photos of students who had received scholarships to music camps and schools. Mrs. Chun, his first teacher, greeted him with a huge hug. Her hair was whiter now, but her smile was as bright as ever. She led him through the updated facility with obvious pride. "Look at what you started," she said, gesturing to a room full of young students playing various instruments. "These children believe in themselves because you showed them it was possible." In one corner, a small boy around 7 years old struggled with a simple melody on an old piano. His concentration was intense, his tongue sticking out slightly as he focused on the keys. The sight reminded him of his own early days learning to play. He walked over to the boy and knelt beside the piano bench. "That is a beautiful song you are working on," he said gently. "Would you like some help?" The boy looked up with wide eyes. Someone had told him who the visitor was, the famous student who had won the competition against all odds. "I cannot get this part right," the boy said, pointing to a difficult section in his beginner book. Together, they worked through the challenging passage. He showed the boy how to position his fingers and explained the rhythm in simple terms. When the boy finally played it correctly, his face broke into a huge grin. "You did it," he said, giving the boy a high five. "Keep practicing and remember, music is not about being perfect. It is about expressing what is in your heart." As he prepared to leave the community center, Mrs. Chun walked him to the door. "I am so proud of the man you have become," she said, her eyes misty with emotion. But I am even prouder of how you use your success to lift up others. That evening, he practiced for his upcoming symphony performance with renewed purpose. Each note he played carried the hopes and dreams of all the young musicians he was inspiring. The broken piano that once threatened to end his musical journey had instead become the foundation for something much larger. His phone rang as he finished practicing. It was Elena Vasquez, the famous pianist who had become his mentor. Her voice was excited as she shared news from the classical music world. "I just spoke with the director of the International Young Artists Program," she said. "They want to invite you to perform at their summer festival in Europe. This could launch your professional career." He felt dizzy with the magnitude of the opportunity. Just a few years ago, he was a foster kid with no prospects. Now the classical music world was opening its doors to him, but as he looked around his small apartment, at pictures of him and his sister, at the scholarship letters on his desk, he realized the most important victory had already been won. He had created a family, inspired others, and proven that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. The broken piano had been meant to silence him. Instead, it had helped him find his voice and use it to change the world, one note at a time.